Today is Friday, June 2nd, 2023. The readings for today, there are two readings. I'm going to focus on just one of them. The two readings are Acts 25 and John 16. I'm going to consider here just John 16 to provide some additional commentary around a topic we discussed yesterday, which relates to the meaning of divinity, the human being, and historical human beings. So at that time, Jesus lifted up his eyes to heaven and said, "As you, Father, did send me into the world, so I have sent them into the world." So let's read again. "As you, Father, did send me into the world." So here, Jesus referring to, or as a symbol of, the ontological ground of personality. Here, the Bible is a story of the personification of the ontological ground of personality. And what we see is, if that ontological ground could speak, it would say, "Father, you sent me into the world." And so here, this is the ontological ground of personality of every human being, in conversation with, as personified, in conversation with its cause. This is a dialogue, we might say, of the soul with its creator. Of course, for any number of reasons, we don't use the word soul, and instead prefer the term ontological ground of personality. So continuing, "So I, the soul, have sent them," the human being, which the soul, we might say, possesses. The soul sends man into the world. Okay. The dialogue continues. "I do not pray for these only, but also those who believe in me through their word, that they may all be one, even as you, Father, are in me and I in you." Okay, let's pause. I do not pray for these only. Who are the ones for whom he prays? I think it must be, I don't know. Someone can tell me if anybody's watching and somebody just tell me what this is. Maybe it's those for whom he's dying. I don't know. Those who don't believe. Though, essentially, those who do not believe in me, which is okay. So he says, "I do not pray for these only, but also for those who believe in me." So again, here I want to reiterate that it's easy to begin to confuse reference. And so the soul, again, is talking to the Father. The soul is in man. "Those who believe in me through their word, that they may all be one, even as you, Father, are in me." Right? I and you and me. That's something we hear Jesus saying all the time. And so what we read this as is a personification of the soul. And it's the human person who needs to have a conversation with their soul, in which they say, "You are in the Father." I'm talking to my soul. "You are in the Father, and the Father is in you." And so that's the uninterrupted. Of course, quite important here, I'm starting to think, is the extent to which this theosis is in some ways umbilical. It's almost as if we're trying to find that to which we were attached when we grew, which has an umbilical symbolism and also kind of a ancestral. So Jesus is man, the Father is in him. Ignoring the confusion, the Father therefore is in man. To the extent that the soul is in man and the Father is in the soul, the Father is in man. And so the purpose of this text is to identify with Jesus as an expression of the inner man, or what I'm starting to call soul, which would be technically referred to as the ontological ground of personality. Okay. "You are in me, I am in you, that they also may be in us." This is the soul. Is the soul here referring? So the soul can be interpreted in two ways. One is, it's the expression of the man, the whole man. The other is, it's an expression of the soul separate from the man in whom the soul resides. So this could be read as both, "I am in you, you are in me, that they also may be in us." So does "they" refer to the man in whom the soul is embedded, or the other human beings in whom the being of this soul is embedded? Okay, there's two ways to read that, and I think both are probably appropriate. Okay, "that they may also be in us, so that the world may believe that you have sent me." The soul is saying, "I pray for those who do not believe in me through their word, that they may all be one, even as you, Father, are in me, I in you, that they also may be in us, so that the world may believe that you have sent me." What I'm picking up from this is there's a way in which the human being being in the soul, in the sense of, just think of a human being and a soul, and the human being being embedded in the soul. The human being is embedded in the soul so that the soul might know that the Father has sent it. In the extroverted way, we might say that multiple human beings need to, well, let's just leave it. I don't think there's an extroverted reading here. That they also may be in us. That would be then, so what this would mean in an extroverted context would be that the human being being in the soul is a precondition for the society being in the world soul, which is the Father. So I think perhaps what the suggestion here is, if we start with the soul speaking to the individual, saying that if you are in me, then you are in the Father because I, the soul, am in the Father. The Father then is the transpersonal element in which every individual who is in the soul is also in. Or, yeah, I don't think that made sense. But if every human being is in their own soul and the soul is in the Father, the hypostasis of the hypostases, then we could say that every human being is in the Father, or the hypostasis of hypostases. Okay. Okay. The glory which you have given me, I have given to them, that they may be one, even as we are one, I and them and you and me, that they may be one. So this is both the individual who is integrated into a whole, and also society who is all embedded in the hypostasis of hypostases. As we are one, I am in them and you and me, they may become perfectly one, so that the world may know that you have sent me and have loved them, even as you have loved me. This is a highly confusing sentence in the sense in which, in the narrative plot, the historical individual is loved by the Father, and it dies so that more could understand the love of the Father. That's one way to read it. The world may know that you have sent me and have loved them, even as you have loved me. The world may know that you have sent me and have loved them, even as you have loved me. Father, I desire that they also, whom you have given me, may be with me where I am. Behold my glory, which you have given me in your love for me before the foundation of the world. Okay, again, this is the soul speaking. O righteous Father, the world has not known you, but I have known you. And these, blah, 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 blah. Man cannot know God, but God and man, however, cannot be known. Okay. So it does raise the question of the ability of human beings to come to know each other. If human beings cannot know each other fully because of finitude, then it is a project destined to failure in an attempt to reconcile man to other men. So what's left is an approximation of coming to know God and man of other men. That's the ideal. If two souls can know each other, or multiple souls can know each other, souls can know other souls. I made known to them your name, and I will make it known that the love with which you have loved me may be in them, and I in them. All right, we've said all this. So the soul is the means by which the Father is known, etc. Okay, so let me just read some comments. So Christ in the Christian religion is a stand-in Father for the Father who only He, that is the ontological ground, can communicate with, and who cannot be known experientially, but only dialectically. So if we think of Nietzsche, God is dead, what he's saying is there exists no authority over man. Therefore, there are attributes of the unknown Father mistakenly projected onto the Christ, namely perfect divinity. That is in the Christian religion, in which the outside individual is identified as the Savior. If you think of it as a soul, then it's possible, okay. Only withdrawal projection places man in proper relationship with God, the being for whom being is an essential property, namely a place of lack of final authority. So the Christian religion holds out the Christ as the new authority over man. But if you read the text as a personification of the soul, then what the soul is saying is that you can know the Father through me. Only the withdrawal projection, yeah, okay, we said that. Places man in proper relationship, okay. So the implication, so this is the problem of contemporary society. The implication of thousands of years of Father projection onto the Christ, God projection onto the Christ, is a naturalism that is not truly naturalistic. It inherits its metaphysics from Christianity, but takes up the perfect divinity for itself, deluding itself into believing that it is the Father of nature who can control it, that man is the Father, the new Father of nature. If there is no Father, that is, if the Christ is not the Father, then man becomes the Father. There is something onto which man must project the Father or the authority. And in the absence of an external referent, this is why Christianity is so efficacious. It is a somewhat inert, although of course not entirely, and there are entire wars based on it, but it is an increasingly inert object onto which to project perfect authority. And so now that is gone because of the deconstruction of the cult of personality, essentially, the projection still remains. It hasn't. So just deconstructing the objective referent, and by objective I mean object, the object onto which the authority is projected, by deconstructing that object, the impossibility of the projection is made clear. But that doesn't prevent the projection from seeking a new referent. And that is this is my contention, is that has now been projected onto man himself. So we said this, in the wake of the loss of absolute authority, man has made himself absolute, even as the reconciliatory message of the unconscious ground of personality remains incomplete. Okay, so all right, we've deconstructed Christianity, because if Christ were fully divine, he would have inaugurated the reconciliation of men on earth. There is no such reconciliation, so the Christ is not the end. He may return, but at that point we're not talking about a person. Now we're talking about something else, because we've deconstructed the referent, which is the perpetuation of the individual of the historic Christ through time and his resurrection. When we introject, we see that that's a metaphysical attribute of all human beings. And now our perfect authority projection has nowhere to go except onto the remnants of the deconstruction, which is the human individual. My contention is that deconstruction has not gone far enough. You have to deconstruct the individual himself. The individual himself falls into the soul. The deconstruction of the soul is into the transpersonal hypostasis of hypostases, the ontological personality of the world ontology, not now personal ontology. There must exist a hypostasis in which all other hypostases adhere. This is the suggestion. Okay. So now that the authority which has been deconstructed from the Christ needs to be projected on the hypostases of all hypostases. This is the safest location for that projection, is onto the world hypostasis. Some would say that it is onto other individuals, but again, it's not a real projection. The contents of the projection is false. And so it needs to be integrated as deeply as possible, because the object onto which it could be projected correctly is absent. Okay. In the wake of the loss of absolute authority, we read that. Until reconciliation of all men is complete, men can claim only impartial victory over nature. The experience of spiritual presence, which is the hypostasis of the world, is in its integration, the realization that one must also exist in that hypostasis in order to have experienced it. It's the transpersonal hypostasis. So you have to project onto God. And God must be understood as something that is absent from creation. Well, let's finish up with Acts. And this is a story of Paul sailing to Rome, forcibly being extradited or whatever to Rome. And on the way, he says, "For this night, there stood by me an angel of God." So they got into very difficult waters, and the ship and the cargo and even the lives were probably going to be lost. "For this night, there stood by me an angel of the God to whom I belong and whom I worship. And he said, 'Do not be afraid, Paul. You must stand before Caesar, and lo, God has granted you all those who sail with you. So take heart, men, for I have faith in God that it will be exactly as I have been told, but we shall have to run on some island.'" So I think just to tie this back with the way in which the projection of the authority onto Jesus has been withdrawn and reprojected onto the image of man, here what we're seeing is that essentially the idea is you can never engineer all mayhem out of the world. There's always going to be danger. The human being who sees himself as a father of nature will still run into these things. And so some of the most challenging human situations will be those that involve, for example, the migration of human beings, the meeting of cultures. These aren't things you can just engineer